You're listening to 2024 in Review, a look back at some of the most compelling conversations and stories of the year from True Crime Today and the Hidden Killers podcast.
You are listening to continuing coverage of the trial of Chad Daybell from True Crime Today and the Hidden Killers podcast. Let's go back to the courtroom.
What's that?
This is a call from and paid for by
Lori.
An inmate at Madison County Jail. This call is subject to recording and monitoring. If you don't wish to talk, hang up now. Thank you for using Telmates.
Hi, babe.
Hello.
Are you okay?
So they're searching the property.
The house right now?
Yeah. Yeah. M&M's. So Mark means we'll be talking to you.
Okay. What, are they in the house?
No, they're out on the property.
Three dead bodies on the defendant Chad Daybell's property and or in the residence. Two of them children. His mistress's kids. Joshua Jackson Vallow and Tylee Ryan were found buried in the defendant's backyard. Tammy Daybell was found dead in their marital bed. And for what? Money, power, and sex. That's what the defendant cared about.
Ms. Blake, I really apologize. Could you just hold the mic right up? We're barely getting your signal strong enough. Thank you.
On October 26th of 2018, Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell met for the first time at a Preparing a People conference in St. George, Utah. You heard from Zulema Pastenis and Melanie Gibb how the first time they met, Lori was flirty. She came on to Chad. But Chad was receptive. You heard from investigator Edwards that a few days after the conference, Google searches were conducted by Chad, Lori Vallow, images of Lori Vallow, Charles Vallow. At the time Chad and Lori met, their spouses were alive and well. Charles Vallow and Tammy Daybell were alive. Lori and Chad were both married, but Chad was Googling about Lori. You heard how sometime after the conference, Lori ended up sharing with Melanie Gibb and Zulema Pastenis how Chad at the conference had told her that they had been married in previous lives. And you heard through the trial, previous lives, multiple probations, multiple creations. It's all the same idea. Why does that matter? It was a way to justify the affair to the people around them. Maybe even to justify the affair to themselves. They were married to other people. But because they'd been married in prior lives, prior probations, prior creations, everything they were doing was okay. You heard about 3 weeks later, after that first conference, that first meeting, Chad was down in Arizona. Around November 15th to 17th, Chad was down there for a conference. But he stayed at Lori's house. And you heard how other people stayed there as well. And one of them that was at the conference, Melanie Gibb, or at the conference and then at the gathering at Lori's house, Melanie Gibb and Zulema Pastenis. And remember, Zulema talked to you all about how Chad sat the women down. So Zulema, Melanie, some other women, and Lori. And he taught them. Chad was the one teaching. Chad was the one sharing these ideas and these concepts. He was sharing them with Lori too. You also heard how shortly after meeting Lori, the defendant began drafting his version of their story, the James and Elena story. And throughout the trial, you heard how Chad and Lori would go by different names sometimes, or they had code names or persons that they claimed to be in prior lives. James and Elena were two of those names. Raphael and Lily, all really Chad and Lori. The James and Elena story was written by Chad. Chad's own words. And what do we know from James and Elena? In James and Elena, and you heard about this from Agent Hart, and you heard about it from analyst Heuermann. James and Elena. Chad writes, at this time, their spirits could not be restrained any longer, and a long-awaited makeout session took place in that lobby. This was manifest in the mortal world to James and Elena through the scientific phenomenon known as loin fire. He also, another excerpt, he resisted an impulse to kiss her, but his entire body was on fire. He instinctively knew she was everything he had ever dreamed of. Additionally, her dimensions were exactly what he had always fantasized about, but that revelation would have to wait a month. These are written about his first meeting with Lori. She is everything he's fantasized about. What is this about for Chad? Sex. He wants to have sex with Lori Vallow. He wants to be in a relationship with her, and he decides that the first time he meets her. We also see in there he has to wait about a month for the full revelation of her dimensions. What does that mean? He has to wait a month before he actually gets to see her body. They're absolutely engaged in an affair. They had two favorite positions that particularly bonded them together. Nothing meant more to James than holding Elena in his arms and unifying their bodies in perfect synchronization. Nothing meant more. This was about sex. The James and Elena story is essentially an autobiography outlining the defendant's sexual affair with Lori Vallow under the facade of having a spiritual undertone or being spiritually sanctioned. But let's call it what it was. Chad's graphic description of his boundless lust for Lori Vallow, who he deemed to have perfect proportions and to be a goddess. Again, Chad is still married as he's writing this story for Lori. And you heard excerpts from the James and Elena story from Agent Hart. James had served in an important position in the Lord's church, and Elena had been his beloved spouse and best friend. That relationship was now meant to continue in this lifetime. Again, married in a prior life, prior probation, it justifies having an affair in this life. He tried to delicately describe their connection to each other, and he was delighted that she believed him. Another theme throughout the trial. Chad is the one with the information. Chad is the one with knowledge, and he shares it with others. Chad shared with Lori their connection to each other, and he was happy she believed him. He knew they were meant to be married again and complete important missions together before the second coming. Again, they're both married to other people. And part of this trial, there was testimony about what we never saw. Through all the communications, through all the discovery, through all the evidence, no indication ever that Chad Daybell intended to divorce Tammy. No indication ever that Chad Daybell intended to separate from Tammy, but he wants to be married to Lori. This mission included being with him, and they would progress together as translated beings. The full plan wasn't yet completely clear to him. Again, Chad is the one that is a self-proclaimed visionary. He claims he gets revelation. He claims he has visions. The full plan wasn't clear to him. What full plan? how he's going to end up being with Lori Vallow. They are both married. You heard how in early 2019, Chad told Zulema Pastenis he wanted to share some teachings with her. They ended up having a phone call, and Chad started to talk to her about this concept of multi-creations or multiple probations. And when Zulema testified, she had some journal entries. Zulema was open to this concept. She trusted Chad. She trusted Lori, and she was open to their teachings. So much so that she would make journal entries of these because she wanted to keep track of them. She wanted to understand. And the one with the page number 1, that's her outline of this concept of multi-creations. And Chad explained that you could have come in multiple creations, you could come multiple times in the same creation. But one theme was if you'd been exalted in one and you came again, you were exalted in this lifetime. He shared with Zulema some of her past lives. He told Zulema that he had a book of life. And through that book of life, he could see people's past lives and he could see into the future. He also told her he didn't actually need the book. He could do it without it. You heard Miss Pulowski, Melanie Pulowski, that is, Melanie Gibb, and Zulema all reference a pendulum or a pendant that the defendant had at some times that he would tell them he could get answers. But again, he didn't have to have that to give them the answers. Common theme, Chad has the answers, Chad has the knowledge, Chad has that special ability. Shortly after this meeting in early 2019, Charles Vallow is deemed dark. Chad Daybell deemed Charles Vallow dark. He actually said he was possessed by an entity named Ned Schneider. In January of 2019, Chad Daybell was doing Google searches for Ned Schneider. Then the idea of castings comes into play. And page 5 from Zulema's journal talks about her understanding of castings and what would happen. And you heard Miss Pulowski, Miss Gibb, and Miss Pastenis all talk about how they were involved in castings at different times. There was testimony that sometimes Chad was there, testimony that sometimes he wasn't. But they would do a casting, a prayer circle, there were some other descriptions, but at the end of the day, the person wasn't there. They weren't physically touching the person. How would they know if a casting was successful? Lori would call Chad. Chad had the information. Chad had the knowledge. When it came to Charles, castings on Ned were said to be successful. Ned was gone. But the problem was that eventually Chad and Lori taught that if a person was possessed, it meant the body had to die. The individual, the actual spirit of that body, was gone. An evil entity was in that body, and in order to set the person free, the body had to die. So when a casting was successful and the body didn't die, well, now there's a new entity. That's what Chad would tell them. So Charles became Garrett. Castings are done on Garrett. They called Chad. It was successful. Well, Charles was still alive. The body didn't die. So now Charles is Iplos. And Iplos is an even more demonic entity. Iplos is so dark that we get a new term introduced of zombie. The other thing that was going on around this same time, as Charles became Iplos, is that Charles actually confronted Lori about her affair with Chad. Around June 29th of 2019, Charles Vallow confronts Lori. And he tells her, I am going to email Tammy Daybell. She deserves to know what's going on. Charles, in fact, sends an email to Tammy Daybell on June 29th of 2019, informing her of the affair. Charles also sends an email to Chad Daybell on June 29th of 2019, confronting him about the affair, telling him it's improper, it needs to stop. Then on July 1st of 2019, Charles tells Lori, I'm going to go meet with Tammy in person. I'm going to tell her what's going on. Lori tells him, she won't talk to you. She's my friend. Lori and Chad are in constant communication. You heard that throughout the trial. They're having an affair. They're talking. They're getting burner phones. And you heard testimony about the burner phones. They all had multiple different phones that they would use. And when I say they all, Chad and Lori and Alex. Only 10 days later, 10 days after Charles threatens to go and tell Chad's wife about the affair, Charles is shot and killed. He's shot and killed by Alex Cox in Arizona. We heard from the Arizona detectives that on that fateful day, Charles had shown up to take his 7-year-old son, little JJ, to school. Instead of getting to take his son to school, he wound up dead. Why? Charles was dark. Charles was a zombie. And if someone's a zombie, if someone's dark, the body has to die. We know that Melanie Gibbs said, she asked Alex, do you believe in these zombie teachings? Do you believe in zombies? Alex's response, 100%. Zulema asked Alex, or when we asked Zulema, did Alex believe Chad? Zulema's response, 100%. Shortly after Charles' death, Melanie Gibb talks to Lori. And you heard from her what was missing. No signs of grief, no signs of remorse. Her husband had just been shot and killed in her home by her brother. No signs of grief, no signs of remorse. On July 11th of 2019, the other thing we know, Chad and Lori were in contact throughout that day. You heard that through Detective Werther's testimony. You heard from Detective Duncan and Detective Werther that there were several text messages exchanged in the morning hours of July 11th of 2019, with the last one being right around the time Charles Vallow would have arrived at Lori's house. Zulema said she saw Alex shortly after the shooting, and she asked him, are you okay? What's going on? Because he also, no signs of remorse, no signs of grief. Alex's response to her, he was a zombie. Alex 100% believed in zombies. Alex 100% believed Chad. Chad said Charles was dark. Charles was a zombie. Chad said if someone's a zombie, the body has to die. Alex shot and killed Charles Vallow. Alex 100% believed Chad. You also heard how at some point Chad had deemed Alex to be Lori's protector. He talked to Alex about how Alex had been her protector in multiple lives, multiple creations, multiple probations. Alex was here to protect Lori. And you heard that Alex relished that role. He relished having a purpose. He relished being part of this. One thing, though, Lori was upset about. Zulema had asked Lori at one point, if Charles is a zombie, why are you back with him? Lori's response, I need to get my finances in order. After Charles' death, Lori reaches out to Chad to tell him, I'm not getting the $1 million life insurance policy. He must have switched the beneficiary. As they proceed through this conversation, Chad's response, interesting if it was him after he had 2 bullets in his chest. No remorse, no grief. Lori did message Chad, though, to let him know that it was probably Ned that changed the insurance before we got rid of him. She's messaging Chad that. She also lets Chad know, don't worry, I'll still get $4,000 a month in Social Security. Tylee Ryan's father had died, and Tylee Ryan had been receiving Social Security benefits. So Lori knew JJ would get Social Security benefits since Charles was dead. Lori was also going to get benefits since she was JJ's custodian. Seven days after Charles' death, Chad is texting Lori. I was told extreme changes are coming for me. I welcome them both. What were the extreme changes? Charles has been dead for 7 days. What extreme changes do we know happen in Chad's life? Well, his mistress's 2 kids end up dead on his property, and his wife Tammy ends up dead in their marital bed. Extreme changes are coming, and I welcome them. Chad and Lori engage in further text conversation throughout that month of July. Chad, at this point, they've started to talk about labeling people as dark. And again, Chad is the one that can do that. They start talking about death percentages. Chad, again, is the only one that can determine someone's death percentage. How close someone is to dying is determined by Chad Daybell. He tells Lori in this message, and keep in mind, he is talking about toddler children, young children. He decreased the pain tolerance to 1% and greatly increased his pain. He then asked Lori, do you want me to cause pain to those 2 3s? Who are the 3s? Again, remember, when someone's light or dark, there's also generally a numeric value or a numeric number assigned to that. In this case, 3 3s. So they were 3 dark. He ends up saying, yes, if they are going to act up, we'll at least give them a reason to scream. These are young children. And specifically, these are the children of Melanie Pulowski that are being referenced. Right after saying he's going to give these children a reason to scream, I love, cherish, treasure, and adore you. He wants to be with Lori Vallow. Chad messages her later in July. Every few weeks, I get to escape and have amazing adventures with my goddess lover. But then I have to return to my place under the stairs, feeling trapped. But I sense permanent freedom is coming. What did Chad need permanent freedom from? He just returned from seeing Lori Vallow. His wife is still alive. He feels trapped when he's at home with his family. Who does Chad want freedom from? Tammy. And he senses it's coming. We talked in this trial about how Chad and Lori would manipulate each other. In this text thread, Lori Vallow is upset with Chad. And Chad tells her, referring to Grandpa Keith, who's someone that's deceased, that he is supposed to warn her that she's unprotected. The angels are angry that Lori's ignoring him. And if she wants that protection back, she better talk to him. Lori's response, I love you. Chad, thank you, my love. I will get things restored. Chad manipulated Lori with power. Chad held himself out to be a visionary. He held himself out to have spiritual gifts, and he would manipulate Lori with that. Lori, on the other hand, she was frustrated. Her husband's gone. Chad's wife is still alive. Chad and Tammy have 5 children. They have a grandchild. Chad's life is undisturbed. And it causes contention between Lori and Chad because Lori wants Chad to be freed up now. So Lori's frustrated. I really do want you to. I just can't be in the way anymore. If things change, then we can talk, but we have nothing until things change. What needs to change? Tammy's in the way. Charles is gone. Lori can't be with Chad because Tammy. Chad's response? I want you. Nothing else matters. Lori manipulates Chad with sex. From the minute he met her, he wanted to be with her, and she knew it. About a month after Charles' passing, Lori's asking Chad, do you think there is a perfectly orchestrated plan to take the children? Chad's response, there is a plan being orchestrated for the children. I was shown last night how it fit together. Again, Lori asked Chad. Chad has the answers. Is there a plan to take the children? And what children are they referencing? JJ and Tylee.
I don't know why it had to go down this road to where we are now in the project.
Mm-hmm. You know, I don't fully understand. I think he'd text you back or write you back.
Ultimately, what I need from you is that the project is going to be finished and everything is going to be fine and it's going to work out.
That's what he said.
Well, I need you to tell me that every day, several times.
Okay. My sweet, lovely Lolo. Things are going to work out, not just because he says so, but because I know so. It's a marvelous plan. Slight
How do you know
hiccup.
so?
How do I know? It's been shown to me, honey. I've seen those beautiful eyes filled with tears as she sings to amazing groups of people. And I've seen that wonderful body dance to heavenly songs. Your purpose is only beginning. It's hardly begun. And it will be the pair. It won't be solo. And it's going to be incredible.
Be cholo and not
I have
solo.
absolutely. That's right. Yep. It will be the Eurythmics. No solo careers. I'm just absolutely sure. I was saying it will be the Eurythmics. It won't be two solo careers.
I know, but I'm saying you said you have absolute what? Confidence?
Absolute assurity, confidence, confirmation. It's going to be as seen. There's some things that aren't going to be altered.
Again, Lori reaches out to Chad. She needs affirmation from him. She needs to talk to him about what he knows with the plan. Lori asked Chad if she should be doing anything in relation to the plan. Chad's response? He tells Lori the Lord told him They just need to keep resolving the telestial issues so they are unencumbered and fully free. What are telestial issues? Remember, telestial means earth. They need to resolve the earthly issues, earthly obstacles, so they can be unencumbered and fully free. Chad tells Lori on August 10th, we're so close to the finish line. On September 3rd, Lori is letting Alex know, that Chad and she are trying to get to the bottom of what they need to do to completely eliminate zombies. And she lets Alex know, I'm sure you will be told also. Alex couldn't rate people. Alex didn't discern if people were light and dark. Alex got the information from Lori and Chad. Lori got the information from Chad. Chad tells Lori, we are surrounded by telestial relatives that are simply obstacles. Earthly relatives that are simply obstacles are surrounding Chad and Lori. And again, he tells Lori, I want to be with you. That is my greatest hope and dream. To be together, they've got to get rid of the earthly relatives that are simply obstacles. Because remember, they need to remove the obstacles so they can be fully free and unencumbered. Shortly after Charles' death in early August of 2019, shortly after Charles' death, Chad Daybell travels down to Arizona, and he stays in the residence where Charles Vallow has recently been shot and killed. Zulema talks about seeing them there. She talks about the fact that she thought they were maybe acting inappropriate, given the fact that Tammy was still alive. Chad assured Zulema that Tammy was going to die, and that Tammy would be okay with he and Lori being together because Tammy was going to move on to her mission. His mission, again, it's with Lori. He says that time and time again. We have a mission together. It's he and Lori. He decides Tammy has her own mission. Why? To justify the affair. Zulema talks about how in August she notices a change in Alex and Chad's relationship. Again, Alex has just shot and killed Charles Vallow, and now he and Chad seem to be closer. She talks about Chad giving Alex a blessing, and in the blessing, he tells Alex that Alex needs to move to Rexburg. Alex had no known ties to Rexburg outside of Chad Daybell. Alex trusted Chad so much that he flew back with Chad to check out Rexburg. Eventually, Alex was told that he was exalted. And remember, we talked a little bit about that and you heard about it in the trial. If someone was exalted in a prior life or a prior creation, they were exalted in this one. And you heard Zulema talk about how Lori would address that. If Lori did something and she was asked about it, she'd tap her hand, doesn't count for me. It didn't count for her because she was exalted. They taught Alex that same thing. What Alex did in this life didn't count for him because he had been exalted. Around September 1st of 2019, Lori ends up relocating to Rexburg as well. JJ and Tylee come with her, as well as Alex Cox, and they move to 565 Pioneer Road in Rexburg, Idaho. Lori ended up telling the principal of JJ's school, Josh Wilson, that she moved to Rexburg because her husband had died of a heart attack and she wanted to move close to family. Lori had no family in Rexburg. Her connection to Rexburg was Chad Daybell. Shortly before moving to Rexburg, you heard from Detective Considas and forensic accountant Mike Douglas that Lori switched Tylee's Social Security money that she got from her father to go into an account associated only with Lori Vallow. That change was made on August 16th of 2019. They then moved to Idaho around September 1st of 2019. Before Lori moved to Rexburg, Chad had already shared with her that Tylee was dark and JJ was dark. And we know what has to happen if someone's dark. If someone's dark and they're an earthly obstacle, the body has to die. Knowing that, Lori still brought her children to Idaho, closer to Chad Daybell. Alex came with her, and remember, Alex believed Chad 100%. In July, 7 days after Charles' death, Chad Daybell texts Lori, "I've been instructed to focus my efforts on Hillary." Who is Hillary? That's Tylee. Lori asks him, "Find out her percentage for me and JJ's." What's the percentage? It's the death percentage. Chad's response, "She is at 0.13. I turned up the pain to 10. Tylee is a 16-year-old girl. He's turning the pain up to 10, and he's saying her death percentage is 0.13. He then tells her that Raphael, another name for Chad, visited him talking about JJ and told him to follow Amy into the light. We all know what it means if someone says, follow someone into the light. July 23rd, again, Lori to Chad. Check Tylee. Why does she want Tylee checked? She's being super sweet and helpful. Her daughter was being sweet and helpful, and Lori wants to know, is she dark? What's her death percentage? And who is she asking for that information? Chad Daybell. On September 8th of 2019, Tylee, Alex, JJ, and Lori take a trip to West Yellowstone, a seemingly normal family outing. However, we know that was the last time Tylee Ryan is ever seen alive. And what is Chad Daybell doing on September 8th of 2019? He's looking up south-southwest wind. Why does this matter? Remember how Tylee was found. Remember what happened to her. That young lady was burned. Her remains discovered on Chad Daybell's property. On September 9th, we heard from Agent Balance and Agent Wright that there was something unusual about a device associated with Alex Cox and where it was located. You heard that when Alex first arrived in Rexburg, his device was at apartment 175 from September 1st to September 5th, pretty much all the time or at normal hours of the day, appeared to be residing there. After that, that device is mainly associated with apartment 107. The device will travel to 175, but generally returns to 107 no later than midnight. The day after, the early morning hours after the last day Tylee is seen alive, that device is at Lori's apartment, apartment 175, the apartment where Tylee Ryan was known to reside, at 2:42 in the morning. The only time in the month of September, with the exception of the first 5 days and the exception of September 30th when that device was left with Lori Vallow, the only time that device is there in those early morning hours. What do we know happens later that morning? The device returns to Alex's apartment, and Chad calls Alex. Where does Alex go after Chad calls him? He heads to Chad's property. And again, you heard from Agent Wright and you heard from Agent Balance that device is up on the Daybell property those morning hours. And there's some data points there showing 9:21, 10:39, 10:57. And what do we also know happened on the morning of September 9th? Chad Daybell sends a message to his wife around the same time that device is there. Well, I've had an interesting morning. I felt I should burn all of the limb debris by the fire pit before it got too soaked by the coming storms. Limb debris, not tree, limb debris. While I did so, I spotted a big raccoon along the fence. I hurried and got my gun, and he was still walking along. I got close enough that one shot did the trick. He is now in our pet cemetery. Fun times. Where was Tylee Ryan's body found? Where those red data points are. In Chad Daybell's pet cemetery. Some of her remains in the fire pit. Where does Chad go after that? Or excuse me, where does Alex's device go? Back to Lori's. Chad calls Alex. He heads right up there. Alex goes, Lori's apartment, Alex's apartment, Chad's property, back to Lori's.
There's more to come in the trial of Chad Daybell. Press subscribe so you don't miss any of our continuing coverage right here from True Crime Today and the Hidden Killers podcast.